My name is Ariana Bennett. I was 19 that year, and I thought I was ready for anything, except the moment my father threw me out like I was a stranger. I remember that night clearly. My mom was setting the table, and my brother Caleb was glued to his phone at the dinner table. My dad, Douglas Bennett, walked into the kitchen just as I found the courage to say two words: I'm pregnant. The room froze. My mom dropped a plate on the floor, and my dad stood motionless, his leather briefcase forgotten on the counter. "What did you just say?" he asked, his voice dropping to something cold and dangerous. I tried to stay calm, my hands clutching the hem of my shirt. "I'm pregnant with Nathan's baby, and I'm keeping it." My dad slammed his hand on the table, sending a glass flying. It shattered on the floor. "What? You think you can disgrace this family for that kid, after everything I've taught you?" My mom said nothing. She stood there like a statue, her lips trembling but silent. Caleb grimaced, looking at me like I'd just burned the house down. "Dad, please listen. Nathan's sick, really sick. Sick? That's your excuse now?" he snapped. "You're using illness to cover up what you did?" I swallowed my tears. "He has a rare form of leukemia. We just wanted to leave a piece of each other behind before it's too late." "Shut your mouth," he roared. "I don't care what the reason is. I will not have my daughter bring shame to this house with some illegitimate child and then play the sympathy card." Before I could respond, he pointed straight at the door. "You either get rid of that thing or you walk out. Now." Every word I had rehearsed disappeared. I turned to my mom, desperate for anything. A look, a word, a sign of support. But she only shook her head and looked away, like I'd ceased to exist. Caleb spoke, voice flat and sharp. "You're seriously going to ruin the family's reputation for a guy who's about to die?" I looked at the people I had trusted to be my anchor, my family, and realized they had never truly seen me at all. That night, I packed in silence. As I crossed the threshold, my dad's voice cut through the stillness. "If you walk out that door with that shame, you are no longer my daughter." I turned back and looked him in the eye. "Then maybe you were never really my father." I left the house I had grown up in with one suitcase and a barely showing belly. Nathan's family lived in the suburbs outside Rochester, New York. They were the only ones I could think to call. When I reached out, his mother, Elaine, asked only one thing: "Are you safe?" When I arrived, she hugged me tight, like a real mother would. No judgment, no questions. Nathan was in the hospital, too weak to sit up, but when he saw me, his eyes lit up. "You're keeping the baby?" he whispered, voice thin as thread. I held his hand, tears soaking into the cold hospital sheets. "No matter what happens, our child will know who their father was." A week later, Nathan slipped into a coma. 2 days after that, he passed away in his sleep. I was still holding his hand. At his funeral, my belly had begun to show. I scanned the crowd, realizing what I already knew. My family hadn't come. No calls, no messages, nothing. That day, I stepped into a new life, one filled with uncertainty, but no longer tethered to anyone who believed love came with conditions. I left Nathan's funeral with swollen eyes and a suitcase full of old clothes, stepping into a life with no clear direction. His family's house was too small to take in another person, and Elaine, his mother, had just lost her husband, so all she could do was hold me tight one last time and slip a white envelope into my hand with $600 and a few worn baby items. I began living in a 2005 Toyota Corolla, ironically, the only thing my father hadn't taken back after disowning me. I parked in 24-hour gas station lots or behind the Safeway. I covered the windows with blankets and kept a stuffed bear in the back seat, my desperate attempt to feel like I still had a home. As my belly grew, sleeping curled up in the back became unbearable. I constantly shifted to avoid cramps. During the day, I applied for jobs anywhere I could: convenience stores, grocery shops, fast food places. They all turned me down the moment they noticed the belly, no matter how oversized my coat was. Only one place said yes: the Cracked Cup Cafe, a tiny coffee shop in Syracuse, New York. The manager, Valerie, a red-haired woman in her 40s with the voice of someone who drank triple-shot espresso every hour, looked me up and down. "You sure you can stand through a full shift behind the bar 7 months pregnant?" she asked. "I can do anything," I replied without blinking. She nodded. "Minimum wage, no benefits, and if you can't stand, don't bother coming back. Deal?" I nodded hard, holding back tears. And that's how I started pulling 8-hour shifts behind the counter, grinding beans, wiping tables, emptying trash cans, while my feet went numb and my back screamed. At night, I parked behind the cafe, waited until everyone left, and crawled back into my car. I ate instant noodles, drank water from a refilled bottle, and wrote in the little notebook Nathan had once given me. Some nights I only wrote one line: "I'm still here, baby." One night it poured. Rain slammed the windshield, and water leaked through the passenger window. I was digging for a plastic bag to wrap around my legs when Valerie tapped on the glass. She stood there, soaked to the bone, holding a box of muffins. "I know you've been sleeping out here every night," she said bluntly. My heart stopped. "I'm sorry. I just need a few more days, and I'll—" "Shut it," she cut me off. "I'm not here to throw you out." She stared at me a long moment, then opened the door and placed the box on the seat. "I've got a cousin, Janet, lives 5 blocks away, just lost her husband, has a spare room, not fancy, but it's got a bed and a kitchen." Before I could speak, she handed me a slip of paper with the address. "Be there before 10 a.m. She knows you're coming." Janet was a short, Irish-American woman with snow-white hair who looked me over and said, "Val says you can tough things out. I don't like strangers, but kids need a roof. You take the room at the end of the hall, kitchen's downstairs, buy your own groceries." And just like that, for the first time in nearly 3 months, I had a roof over my head. Janet wasn't warm, but she didn't meddle. As long as I cleaned up and kept quiet. I gave birth on a freezing winter night, wind howling through the window cracks. Labor hit so suddenly I nearly collapsed on the kitchen floor. Janet called 911 while I bit down on my lip, drenched in sweat. After 16 hours at Krause Health Hospital, I gave birth to a baby boy weighing 5 pounds 9 ounces. I named him Liam Nathaniel Bennett. When the nurse placed him on my chest, he opened his eyes, hazel, just like his father's. I didn't cry. I just whispered a promise. "I won't let anyone hurt you. Not ever." When I brought Liam home, swaddled in a soft, pale mou blanket, I knew life was far from stable. But for the first time in months, I saw something like light. Not a bright future, just the possibility of survival, one breath at a time. And in that moment, it was enough. Liam was 3 months old when I decided to return to my old dream, becoming a nurse. It used to be the only thought that kept me going through those nights sleeping in my car and mornings washing up in gas station sinks. But now, with a newborn in my arms, it wasn't just a dream, it was survival. I started over, enrolling in online classes at Onondaga Community College to retake my basic credits. At first, Janet didn't seem to care, but when she saw me studying with Liam in my lap, she left a scribbled note on my table. "If you need me to watch him for a few hours so you can study, just ask." I cried when I read that. Not out of emotion, but because I knew I couldn't do this alone forever. By day, I studied. By night, I worked shifts at the cafe. Some days I had to bring Liam with me when Janet was too tired or couldn't handle the crying. Valerie, gruff and sharp-tongued, surprised me with a soft wool blanket for Liam at Christmas. If I knew I'd end up the honorary grandma here, I wouldn't have signed up to manage this backwater dump, she grumbled, stuffing the box into my car. Then one day in March, I got a call from a law office in Albany. The caller introduced herself as Miriam Lawson, legal representative for the clinical trial Nathan had participated in. "I know this may be unexpected," she said, "but during a period of stability in his condition, Nathan signed some additional paperwork. He designated you as the beneficiary of a life insurance stipend set up by the pharmaceutical sponsor." I froze. She continued, "It's $18,400. The funds will be transferred within 10 business days." I hung up, my hands still trembling. It wasn't a fortune, but for a single mom living off tips and kindness, it was a lifeline. I didn't splurge. I used part of it for next semester's tuition, bought a new laptop, fixed my car, and enrolled Liam in part-time daycare. 2 years later, I was officially accepted into the licensed practical nursing program at SUNY Upstate. I was one of only 2 students with a childhood. The other was Marlene, a single mom of 3 who used to work as a hairdresser. We became each other's lifelines, taking turns babysitting while the other studied or interned. At night, I studied at the kitchen table while Liam slept on the little couch. Sometimes I reviewed flashcards taped to the back of my phone while administering shots to Alzheimer's patients. Exhaustion became a daily companion. But I never allowed myself to quit, not when my son was growing, looking up at me with those innocent eyes and calling me Mommy. 3.5 years later, I held my degree with a spotless transcript. At graduation, Janet sat in the front row, wearing a dark dress and holding a small bouquet. She didn't say congratulations. She just gave my shoulder a firm pat and said, "Now go get a real place to live, and give that boy back his last name." I laughed out loud. She was the only one who could talk to me like I was 16 again. A few months later, I was hired as a full-time nurse in the recovery ward at Krause Hospital. On my first shift, I walked into the very room where I once endured the final hours of labor with Liam. I stood silently for a long moment by bed number 3, where I had once lain, crying out in pain with no one by my side. I walked out of the room feeling like I had stitched up an invisible wound. 2 years later, I was finally able to finance my first home, a small 2-bedroom condo in North Syracuse. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. I let Liam choose the paint color for his room. At 5 years old, he was adamant, sky blue. On move-in day, he ran from room to room like a little whirlwind. I sat on the living room floor, still holding a cheap pizza box, and burst into laughter. I had lost everything, my family, the man I loved, everything that once defined me. When Liam turned 10, I began to notice something different about him. It wasn't his grades. It was those rainy afternoons when he'd sit for hours at the old upright piano I had bought from a nursing home for $150. No teacher, no sheet music, no pressure, just sound, clear, timid, yet full of emotion. One evening, while I was cooking dinner, Liam called out, "Mom, I wrote this. Can you listen?" I dried my hands and walked over as he began playing a melody I'd never heard before, slow at first, then gradually faster, yet fluid. It ended on a long, deliberate rest that felt unfinished. I stood still, not because I was surprised, but because it was so unmistakable. He had Nathan's gift. The way he tilted his head to listen, the way his small hands adjusted pressure, like he was speaking to each key. After that night, I looked for a music teacher. Unexpectedly, the only person Liam agreed to learn from was Mr. Gregory, a reclusive elderly man at the end of our street who used to teach at Juilliard. After hearing Liam play, he asked me one thing. "Do you realize you're raising a real composer?" I didn't answer. I just clutched my purse strap and gave a quiet nod. At 13, Liam won first prize in the National Young Composers Competition for a piece titled Silence Before Rain. He wrote it in just 3 days, but it was the culmination of years growing up in emotional silences and unspoken losses. The piece was selected for performance at Lincoln Center in New York. That night, I sat in the second row, wearing a simple black dress, heart pounding as my son stepped into the spotlight. He bowed, then placed his hands on the keys. In that moment, I saw Nathan alive again, not in body, but in music. The piece ended with a soft, low note. The auditorium paused in silence for a few seconds before erupting in applause. I covered my face, tears streaming. This time, they were tears of pride. After that night, many people approached me. Journalists, scholarship coordinators. A reporter from WNYT in Albany wanted to do a short feature titled The Music Boy and His Single Mom Nurse. I almost declined. But then I thought, maybe someone out there is like I once was, grieving, struggling, trying to raise a child alone. Maybe our story could help them keep going. The segment aired on the 10th anniversary of Nathan's passing. I shared our journey, from being disowned, living in my car, giving birth alone, to becoming a nurse and nurturing my son's gift for music. The final scene showed Liam playing a section of Silence Before Rain, while I stood backstage wearing Nathan's sapphire ring on a chain around my neck. I didn't expect the video to go viral, over 2 million views in under a week, and what I least expected, it ended up right in front of my old family. On a Saturday morning, while watering the plants out back, I got an email from a name I had long erased from my contacts. Caleb Bennett. Ariana, I saw you on TV. Mom and Dad saw it too? Mom cried the whole night. Dad didn't say anything, but I watched him stare at the screen long after the show ended. They want to meet Liam, if you'll allow it. I stood frozen, water still running over my hand. The emotion wasn't anger. It was something murkier. Curiosity, caution, fear? Fear they'd undo what I built. Fear they'd hurt Liam. But deep down, I couldn't deny this. I used to be the girl who longed for a single glance from her parents. And now, I was the mother of a child growing up with questions about where he came from. I didn't respond right away. But that email was the matchstick that lit everything that came next. Old wounds reopened, and those who once cast me out trying to return, with late apologies and a truth they had hidden for over a decade. I read Caleb's email 3 times and still couldn't bring myself to hit reply. Every word pulled up memories I'd buried for 15 years. Mom cried all night, Dad said nothing. They want to meet Liam. I didn't understand why my chest tightened. They weren't there when I needed them most. When I panicked holding a newborn. When I had no idea how to bring down a fever. When I sobbed in the middle of the night from exhaustion. They weren't there when Liam spoke his first word, or when he stood on stage at Lincoln Center and brought an entire audience to silence. And now that our story had aired on television, they came looking. It took me 2 days to decide. I finally sent Caleb a short reply. I won't stop Liam from knowing his grandparents, but the visit comes with conditions. Absolute honesty. No harm to my son. And if this is just about easing guilt before vanishing again, don't come at all. He replied almost instantly, I understand. We'll accept any condition you set. I chose my home as the meeting place, my space where Liam felt safe. I spent the entire morning cleaning, not to impress, just to quiet the nerves. Liam sat by the piano, fingers gliding over the keys the way he always did when he was nervous. Mom, who are they? I took a deep breath. They're your grandparents, and that's Uncle Caleb. They didn't understand me back then, but today they want to meet you. If you're not comfortable, I won't let them stay. Liam said nothing. He just nodded, then played a short section of Silence Before Rain, his way of steadying himself. At exactly 2 o'clock in the afternoon, a gray SUV pulled up in front of the house. Through the window, I saw my father step out, his hair nearly all white, his frame noticeably thinner. My mother followed, same bob haircut, now completely silver. Caleb opened the doors for both and was the first to walk up the steps. I opened the door before they could even ring the bell. All 3 froze when they saw me. Older, steadier, no longer the desperate 19-year-old girl who left with nothing. I didn't hug. I didn't offer my hand. I simply said, Come in. The living room was quiet, just like any other day. Liam sat upright at the piano, looking up as they entered. No one spoke at first. My mother raised a trembling hand to her mouth. Oh my God. My father stood like a statue. Liam looked at them, then at me. I gave him a small nod. He rose, stepped forward, and extended his hand like a little gentleman. I'm Liam. It's nice to meet you. Caleb was the first to speak, his voice shakier than I expected. Hi there. I'm Caleb, your mom's older brother. My mother broke into tears. You look like Nathan. Oh, God, it's uncanny. I sat down on the opposite couch and gestured to the seating area. We need to talk. The conversation started awkwardly. My father, who used to be the most outspoken of them all, didn't say a word for nearly 30 minutes. My mother told me she had quietly followed our lives through news articles, awards, and performance clips. I kept them all in a box, she said. I couldn't let anyone see, because I knew I was wrong. Caleb admitted something that reopened an old wound. Back then, I read your messages. I couldn't find proof of Nathan's illness, so I told Mom and Dad you made it up. I was wrong, Ariana. I turned to my father. And you? Did you ever ask me about the truth, about the love, the diagnosis, what it was like holding Nathan as he faded? He didn't meet my eyes, but his voice trembled. No, I chose silence. I couldn't handle the thought of my daughter being pregnant. For a reason I couldn't understand, I only felt anger, and I let it destroy everything. Liam quietly stood. He walked to the bookshelf and pulled down a photo frame. It was Nathan, healthy, smiling, holding his cello on our porch. This is my dad, Liam said, offering them the picture. Mom says I got his eyes and his love for music, but I got her strength, too. No one responded. Only tears. That visit didn't fix everything, but it was a start. Before they left, I made myself clear. If you really want to be grandparents, start by being present. No promises, no vanishing acts. My father stood, and for the first time, looked me in the eye. I don't expect forgiveness, but I'll do anything to make it right. I looked at Liam. He smiled gently. I think a little house concert at Miss Janet's might be a good start. The whole room burst into laughter. Not loud, but enough to tell me, maybe this time no one's walking away. I don't call what happened forgiveness. It was just a door left slightly ajar, enough for those who once slammed it shut to find their way back if they were patient and sincere. My parents started small. A birthday card for Liam, a quick call after each of his performances, then short visits, with no demands, no agenda. I didn't stop them, but I wasn't quick to welcome either. After that first meeting, I made a suggestion they probably didn't expect. I want us to do family therapy, I said calmly. If you're serious, start by facing the truth. Without blame. Caleb agreed almost instantly. My mother nodded, though her eyes were filled with hesitation. My father said nothing at first, but eventually he answered. If that's what it takes to start over, I'll do it. Carmen was a black woman in her early 50s, with a calm voice and eyes so sharp I felt like a child in her presence, even as a grown woman, even as a mother. No one's here to point fingers, she said in the very first session. We're here to understand, to learn how not to hurt each other anymore. Those first sessions felt like ripping open a wound that never healed. My father confessed that he buried his regret in church work. I thought I was preserving dignity, he said, but really, I was just afraid to face what I'd done. My mother admitted she had wanted to call me countless times, but every time she reached for the phone, my father's silence stopped her. I didn't have the courage to stand up, and because of that, I lost you. Caleb went quiet when I recounted sleeping in my car at 8 months pregnant, because no landlord would rent to a homeless, jobless, pregnant girl. I thought you left out of spite, he whispered. I had no idea what you were living through. Liam joined us for a few sessions, once he felt safe enough. In one private one, he told Dr. Harmon, I don't hate my grandparents, but I don't get why they left my mom, especially when she was just trying to keep a part of my dad alive. Dr. Harmon nodded. That question may take time to answer, but the fact that you asked it, that's brave. 3 months after the first visit, I let my parents take Liam on a weekend trip, if Caleb came along. They chose Finger Lakes National Park, the same place my dad had taken me when I was 7. When they came back, Liam was bursting with stories, printed photos, and a sketchbook where he'd drawn Grandpa awkwardly trying to start a fire. "Grandpa's clumsy," he giggled, "but he's patient. I like that." I looked at a photo of Liam sitting on my father's shoulders, waving a charred marshmallow like a trophy. For the first time, the past didn't jab me like a knife. One Sunday night, after Liam had gone to bed, I got a text from my mother. "I'm trying to relearn your chicken porridge. You still used thyme, right?" I smiled and wrote back, "And ginger, you always forget the ginger." It was a small, almost meaningless exchange, but it warmed me. Not because she was atoning for anything, but because she was trying to learn how to be a mother again. I still kept my boundaries. No one got in unless their intentions were clear. But I was learning to soften, bit by bit. Willem grew closer to them, yet he always understood the road his mother had walked to get there. Once he asked me, "Have you forgiven them?" I answered without hesitation. I don't know if it's forgiveness, but I feel lighter, and sometimes that's enough." He nodded like an old soul. "I think they're trying, and I think that alone is worth a shot." I looked at him, this boy born of a love the world tried to erase, and now the bridge reconnecting me to it. Maybe none of us were perfect, but in this fragile journey, what mattered wasn't how wrong we started. It was whether we dared to make it right. Liam turned 15 with a small graduation ceremony at the Youth Arts Academy in Albany. Not only did he graduate early, but he was also invited to perform at the 50th anniversary concert of the Juilliard School of Music, the dream his father once left unfinished. That night, under the warm lights of a grand stage, Liam sat at a concert grand piano. His piece, Whispers of Blue, an original composition, flowed like a quiet message to the father he had never met. I sat in the audience wearing Nathan's old sapphire ring on a chain around my neck. My mother sat beside me. For the first time watching a performance, not with tears of regret, but of pride. My father, now in a wheelchair with a weakened left hand from a minor stroke last year, still sat upright, clutching the program where Liam's name was printed boldly on the cover. Caleb sat a few rows back with his wife and 2 daughters. Liam affectionately called them Uncle Caleb's family, not quite blood, but very much part of the healing. After the show, I took Liam out to celebrate at a cozy Italian restaurant by the lake. On the drive home, he rested his head on my shoulder and asked softly, "Do you think, if Dad were alive, he'd have taught me cello?"